He never imagined that an ordinary workday could turn into something that would change his life forever. He was just a quiet man working at a remote space research station, a place surrounded by miles of empty land, sharp winds, and a silence so deep that sometimes it felt like the whole world had gone to sleep. Most people would find the job boring, but he liked it. He liked the slow pace, the routine, and the feeling that he was doing something meaningful, even if nobody really noticed. His job was simple: monitor incoming radio signals from space, filter out noise, and look for anything unusual. The station was not famous or large. It wasn't the kind of place where big discoveries usually happened. Most days, he stared at screens that showed long lines of data that never changed. But he didn't complain. He believed that patience was part of the job. That night, it was cold. The wind outside shook the metal walls of the station. He wrapped his hands around a warm mug of tea and leaned back in his chair. The screens glowed softly in front of him. He blinked slowly, expecting another calm night. Nothing felt different. Nothing felt strange. But then something moved on the main monitor dot at first. He thought it was just a glitch. The equipment was old, and sometimes the monitors flickered for no reason. But the pattern didn't disappear. It repeated, and then repeated again. He sat up straight, his eyes focused. The small dots and dashes spreading across the screen were not random. They were too clean, too even, too intentional. He frowned and typed a few commands. More data appeared. He checked the frequency, checked the source direction, checked it again. It wasn't coming from a satellite, and it wasn't coming from Earth. It was coming from deep space. He called in 2 colleagues who were in the next room. They rushed in, confused by the urgency in his voice. They stared at the screen for a long moment before one of them whispered, almost afraid to say it out loud, "This looks like a beacon." They all knew what that meant. A beacon wasn't just noise. It wasn't an accident. A beacon was something someone sent. And this signal was steady, organized, and repeated at perfect intervals. No natural object could do that. The 3 of them looked at each other. Their hearts pounded. They knew they weren't allowed to make wild claims, but they also knew they had to take the signal seriously. They worked quickly, running tests, verifying the origin. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. It was coming from a very distant point in the sky. Far beyond the reach of anything human-made, the man felt something he hadn't felt in years: excitement mixed with fear. It was the kind of feeling you get when you stand at the edge of something. Unknown dot, the team leader contacted their central office to report the signal. They expected to be told to ignore it or keep monitoring. But instead, they received a surprising order. They were told to send a passive reply signal, not a message, not a greeting, just a simple repeated pattern to confirm that they had received the signal. The man typed the command himself. His fingers trembled slightly as he pressed the final key. A soft beep confirmed the transmission was sent. After that, nothing happened. The signal from space continued, but there was no sudden change, no reply. The team took turns staying awake through the night, waiting for anything unusual. But the hours passed quietly. By morning, they were tired but calm. Maybe it was nothing after all. Maybe it was just some strange cosmic event. But everything changed 3 days later. The station received a message that left everyone speechless. A large unidentified craft had been detected entering Earth's outer orbit. It matched the direction of the beacon's origin, and it was slowing down, as if preparing to hover near the planet. The world outside the research station didn't know anything yet. The news hadn't been released. Many officials weren't even informed. Only a small group knew what was happening, and they moved quickly. They needed someone from the research station to make first contact, because the craft seemed to be responding to the same frequency the man had used when he sent the passive reply. This wasn't a coincidence. The higher-ups reviewed the station's staff profiles. They noted that the man was calm, cooperative, and had the clearest communication skills. He had also been the one who discovered the signal that seemed to matter to them, because within a few hours, he received direct orders. He was to act as the representative for the initial communication. He froze when he heard the decision. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a leader. He was just a quiet researcher who preferred to work alone. The idea of standing in front of something or someone unknown frightened him deeply. But there wasn't time to argue. The craft had already moved closer. He was escorted to an isolated area not far from the station. A smooth circular platform had been set up earlier that morning. Officials monitored the sky. The wind was cold and sharp against his face. His heart beat fast, louder than the hum of the generators around him. Then the sky changed. There was no explosion, no bright beam, no threat. Instead, a soft glow spread across the clouds, and a large craft descended slowly until it hovered above the platform. It was silent, so silent that the air felt almost too still. The man stared at the craft in awe. It looked nothing like the ships humans built. It had curved surfaces, pale lights, and a gentle movement that felt alive rather than mechanical. A door opened. A group of beings stepped out. They were tall, graceful, and calm. Their movements were smooth, their body language soft, not aggressive. They did not carry weapons. They stood in a formation that felt ceremonial, like they were honoring the moment. The man was invited to step forward. He hesitated, but he also sensed that they meant no harm. His fear mixed with curiosity. He exhaled slowly and walked toward them. The ground felt unsteady beneath his feet, as if every step pushed him into a new version of reality. One of the beings spoke. The voice was gentle, almost musical. The words were not Earth language, but somehow he understood them. It wasn't telepathy. It was more like the meaning reached him without sound. They welcomed him. They invited him aboard their craft. He asked why. He asked what they wanted from him. The being explained that their queen wished to meet him, and that she carried no intention of harm. They had been observing Earth for many years, quietly and peacefully. They saw humans not as threats, but as unique creatures with rare emotional qualities. The queen wanted to speak with someone who carried a specific emotional pattern, something they detected in his signal reply. He didn't understand what that meant, but he nodded nervously. A ramp extended from the craft. The wind brushed against his back as if urging him forward. With one final breath, he walked inside. The interior of the craft was bright and warm. The walls glowed softly, like they were made of light rather than metal. The beings around him moved with an air of respect, not dominance. He felt no fear now, just wonder. After a short walk through a long hallway, he stepped into a large chamber. At the center stood the queen. She was tall, elegant, and carried a presence that was gentle yet powerful. She approached him slowly, studying him with eyes that seemed to understand more than words ever could. She greeted him in the same calm, meaningful voice. She thanked him for responding to the signal. She explained that their people had been searching for someone with a rare emotional frequency, something humans didn't even know they had. She said he had it. He didn't know how to react. He wasn't special. He wasn't a leader or a hero. He was just a quiet man who liked peaceful work. But the queen smiled warmly, as if she knew exactly what he was thinking. She told him that greatness wasn't always in loud actions, that sometimes it lived in quiet hearts. Before he could respond, she said something that made him tense. She wanted him to visit their home world, only for a short time, she assured him. She didn't want to keep him away from Earth. She only needed his help for a matter of importance. She didn't say what that matter was, not yet. Her voice carried both urgency and care, like she was asking him for something delicate. His mind spun with fear, confusion, and curiosity. But something in her tone made him feel safe, like she truly meant no harm. He looked at her, swallowed his fear, and nodded. The queen smiled. The chamber lights brightened gently, almost like the craft was welcoming him. And that moment standing inside, a ship not built by human hands, was the moment his ordinary life ended, and a story he could never have imagined began. The journey to the alien world was nothing like what he expected. There was no shaking, no loud engine noise, no sense of speed. When the craft left Earth's atmosphere, it felt smoother than an elevator rising in a quiet building. He sat near a window-like panel that showed a view he never thought he would see with his own eyes. Stars looked clearer, brighter, almost close enough to touch. The Earth slowly shrank into a glowing blue circle. For a long moment, he forgot about his fear. He just stared at the view, unable to believe any of it was real. The beings around him moved gently, almost silently. They didn't stare at him or make him feel strange. They acted as if bringing a human on board their ship was normal. He appreciated that. It made him feel a little less nervous. As time passed, the interior lights softened, as though the ship adjusted itself to keep everyone calm. At some point, one of the beings offered him a drink. The container looked unfamiliar, but the liquid tasted fresh, almost like water mixed with something sweet. He nodded politely and thanked them, unsure if they understood the word "thank you," but they smiled anyway. After several hours, or what felt like several hours, the ship entered a different region of space. He noticed bright swirls of color outside, like clouds made of light. He had never seen anything like it before. He asked one of the beings what it was, and although their explanation was simple, he understood the meaning. Their home was close. As the ship continued forward, a planet came into view. It wasn't like Earth. It had a soft, pale glow, almost like it was wrapped in a transparent mist. Large patches of silver and turquoise covered its surface. He stared at it with a quiet sense of awe. This was where he was going. This was the world of beings who had been observing Earth for years, maybe longer. The landing was smooth. When the ship touched the ground, there was only a faint hum. A door opened, and warm air flowed in a gentle temperature, neither too hot nor too cold. He stepped out slowly. The ground beneath his feet was firm, but softer than stone. The sky had a faint golden tint, as if it was always early morning. A group of attendants waited outside the ship. They bowed slightly, welcoming him. He didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded back. They led him through a long pathway lined with tall, shimmering structures. These buildings weren't made of bricks or metal. They looked almost grown rather than built, as if nature and technology had fused together. He felt small, out of place, and extremely careful with every step he took. But no one rushed him. No one pressured him. Everyone around him moved with calm confidence, guiding him gently. Eventually, they brought him to a larger structure that stood at the center of their city. The interior felt warm and peaceful. Soft lights glowed along the walls, creating a sense of comfort. He was led into a quiet room where he was told to wait. Moments later, the queen entered. Her presence was still the same calm, graceful, yet powerful in a gentle way. She approached him slowly, as if making sure he didn't feel overwhelmed. She welcomed him again and thanked him for trusting them enough to travel so far. She told him that before he met the group she wanted him to meet, there was someone important he needed to see first. She gestured toward a side door. The door opened, and two attendants stepped in. Between them was a young child, small compared to the other beings on the planet. The child's eyes were bright and curious, scanning everything in the room before settling on him. He didn't know what he expected, but it definitely wasn't this. The child didn't seem afraid. Instead, it tilted its head, studying him closely. There was something innocent in its eyes, something very familiar, almost human-like. He looked at the queen, unsure what to say. She rested her hand gently on the child's shoulder and said this child was from the royal lineage and very important to their future. The child had struggled to connect emotionally with others, something rare in their society. They were not sure why, but the queen said the child reacted differently when the human signal was detected. The child became calmer, curious, and strangely drawn toward the one who sent the reply. He didn't understand what that meant. The queen asked him to spend a little time with the child, not as part of a test, but simply to see how the child reacted to him in person. He hesitated at first. He wasn't someone who worked with children. He had no special skills. But he nodded politely. The child stepped forward slowly, staring at him with wide eyes. The room felt incredibly quiet, as if everyone was holding their breath. The man knelt down, so he wasn't towering over the child. He gave a small, gentle smile. The child blinked, then reached out a hand and touched his sleeve lightly. Its small fingers curled around the fabric, feeling the texture. For some reason, he felt his chest tighten with a strange warmth. The child wasn't speaking, but its expression said a lot. It wasn't afraid of him. It wasn't confused. It was curious, almost comforted. The queen watched carefully, but she didn't interrupt. The child moved closer and tugged at his arm softly. He wasn't sure what it wanted, so he let the child lead him. They walked into a circular room filled with soft cushions and glowing objects. The objects floated gently in the air, moving in slow patterns. The child sat on one of the cushions and patted the space next to it, as if inviting him to sit too. He sat down. The cushion adjusted slightly to his weight, shaping itself to make him more comfortable. The child picked up one of the glowing objects and held it toward him. It wasn't heavy, but it felt warm. It pulsed lightly, almost like a heartbeat. The child watched his reaction very closely. When he smiled, the child's eyes brightened, and it made a soft sound he couldn't understand. But it sounded happy. For the next hour, the child stayed close to him, handing him floating toys, copying his expressions, and following the movement of his hands. Every time he smiled gently or nodded, the child responded as though it understood his emotion, not just his actions. The attendants whispered to each other. Some looked surprised. Others looked relieved. Later, when they led him out of the nursery room, he noticed something unusual. Whenever one of the attendants tried to guide the child away, the child refused to let go of his hand. It held onto him tightly, with the same natural trust a human child might show toward someone they felt safe with. He wasn't sure how to react. He had never formed a bond with anyone so quickly, let alone a child from another world. But he didn't pull away. He knelt down again and gently stroked the back of the child's hand. "It's okay," he whispered softly, unsure whether the child understood the words. The child didn't speak, but it pressed its forehead lightly against his arm. As if seeking comfort, the queen stepped forward. Her expression showed clear surprise, mixed with something like relief or hope. She explained that the child had never reacted this way to anyone on their planet, not even to members of the royal family. The child kept distance from everyone, avoided physical contact, and rarely showed any emotion. But now, the child was holding on to him with a sense of trust and attachment. He felt overwhelmed. Why him? Why would a child from another world feel safe with him? The queen didn't give him an answer. Not yet. Instead, she asked him if he would be willing to stay for a short time, just to help the child learn how to connect with others emotionally. She said it would not be forever, and they would keep him safe at every moment. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't trained for this. He wasn't a teacher or a counselor. He was just someone who tried to be gentle and patient with others. But when he looked down and saw the child gripping his hand, he felt something inside him soften. Maybe this child didn't need a teacher. Maybe it just needed someone to treat it with patience and kindness. He finally nodded. The queen bowed her head slightly in gratitude. She told him they would prepare a place for him to rest and stay, and that the child would visit him the next day. As he walked through the long corridors toward his resting place, he felt a strange mix of emotions: fear, curiosity, confusion, but most of all, he felt the lingering warmth of the small hand that had held on to him so tightly. He didn't know what any of this meant, but he knew one thing for certain: the child had chosen him. And for reasons he didn't yet understand, that choice was going to change everything. The next morning, he woke up earlier than he expected. The room he had slept in was quiet and warm, with soft light glowing from the walls instead of lamps. The bed adjusted to his body when he turned, making him feel strangely comfortable despite being millions of miles away from Earth. For a moment, he just lay there, staring at the smooth ceiling, trying to understand how his life had changed so quickly. He had gone from a quiet researcher to someone who was now deeply involved in the life of a child from another world. It felt unreal, like a dream he hadn't fully woken from, but the warmth of the room and the memories of the previous day told him it was all real. A soft chime played somewhere near the door. It wasn't loud, more like a gentle reminder. The door slid open, and an attendant stepped in, greeting him with a polite nod. They informed him that the Queen requested his presence in the royal hall for an official gathering. They also mentioned that the child had been asking for him since dawn. He wasn't surprised. He had felt an unexpected bond with the child, too. Something natural and unforced. It wasn't like a parent's relationship or a teacher's role. It was a quiet mutual trust. The child saw something familiar in him, and he couldn't deny that he felt something warm toward the child, too. The attendants guided him through long hallways. The building seemed alive, glowing softly as if responding to the presence of people. When he reached the entrance to the royal hall, he paused. The doors were tall and smooth, opening slowly as though inviting him inside. The hall was huge, far bigger than anything he had seen on Earth. The ceiling sparkled as if stars had been stitched into it. Rows of important-looking beings stood on both sides of a central pathway. Their outfits shimmered gently, indicating their roles: advisors, guardians, scholars, and other members of the court. Everyone looked serious, but not unfriendly. In the center of the hall stood the Queen. She carried the same calm presence as always. Beside her, standing slightly behind, was the child. As soon as the child saw him, its eyes lit up with excitement. It took 2 small steps forward before stopping, as if waiting for permission. One of the court members whispered something under their breath. Others exchanged surprised looks. He didn't understand why. The child wasn't doing anything wrong. But he kept walking. The sound of his footsteps echoed slightly in the hall. When he reached the center, the Queen nodded to him warmly and thanked him for coming. She said today was a formal gathering, a meeting of the highest-ranking members of their world. They were here to discuss matters related to future relations with Earth. He nodded, feeling a bit nervous under so many watchful eyes. But before anyone could continue speaking, something unexpected happened. The child walked straight up to him boldly, without hesitation, and took his hand. Murmurs filled the hall instantly, soft at first, then louder. Some beings leaned forward in shock. Others exchanged glances of disbelief. A few even stepped back, as if witnessing something impossible. He felt the child's small fingers grip his hand tightly. It wasn't out of fear. It was comfort, like a child running to someone they trust. He whispered softly, "It's okay," even though he wasn't sure what was happening. Then the child said a single word: "Father." The hall fell silent, completely silent. The kind of silence that presses against your skin. Every face in the room froze. Even the Queen, who rarely showed strong emotion, looked momentarily stunned. He felt the world tilt beneath him. Father? Why would the child say that? He had never met these beings before this journey. There was no reason for the child to think of him that way. He stared at the child with wide eyes, his heart pounding. I'm not. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. The Queen raised her hand gently, signaling the hall to remain calm. Her expression softened as she stepped forward. She asked him not to panic. She asked everyone else to wait before jumping to conclusions. She stood in front of him and looked directly into his eyes. For the first time since he met her, her voice carried something deeper, a mix of sorrow, relief, and honesty. She told him there was something he needed to know. Something they had kept hidden because they weren't sure how to explain it earlier. Many years ago, her people had been trying to solve a problem. Their next generation of children had difficulty developing emotional understanding. They were intelligent, peaceful, and advanced, but something was missing. Without emotional stability, the young ones struggled to form connections. And this threatened their future. Their scientists studied emotions from many species, but none matched what they needed until they observed Earth. Humans, despite their flaws, possessed deep emotional range. Humans cared strongly, loved strongly, feared strongly, and connected easily to one another. So, in their research efforts, they quietly analyzed emotional genetic markers from simple donated samples that had unintentionally reached space research archives. Those samples came from Earth volunteers who once gave harmless biological material for scientific studies, not knowing it would travel far beyond the planet. One of those samples belonged to him. He froze. The Queen continued softly. She explained that his sample was unique. It carried emotional markers that were extremely rare. His empathy, patience, and calm emotional patterns stood out among thousands of human samples. Their scientists used those patterns to help stabilize the emotional core of the next royal child. The child standing beside him, he wasn't the child's father in the human biological sense, not fully, not in the way humans define it, but a part of him, a piece of his emotional blueprint, had helped the child develop traits it couldn't develop. Otherwise, that was why the child reacted to his presence. That was why it followed him. That was why it trusted him with a closeness it never showed to anyone else. The Queen explained that they had never intended for him to meet the child. The research was ethical in their culture. They didn't view emotional patterns the same way humans viewed parenthood. But when he responded to their beacon, and they saw the child reacting emotionally in ways it never had before, they realized something important was happening. The child didn't see him as a biological parent. It saw him as someone who carried a piece of its emotional origin, someone familiar, someone safe, someone like a father figure. His throat felt tight. He didn't know what to say. He looked down at the child, who was staring up at him with a pure, trusting expression. There was no confusion, no fear, just simple recognition. He whispered, "Why me?" But the words barely came out. The Queen gently placed her hand on the child's shoulder. She said that sometimes the universe brings unexpected connections. Sometimes the quietest people hold the strongest emotional patterns. She told him that he had given the child something their world could not, the ability to connect, to trust, and to feel. He felt tears sting his eyes, though he tried to hide them. He wasn't a parent back on Earth. He had never even imagined someone calling him father. But here he was, on a world far from home, holding the hand of a child who saw him that way without hesitation. The hall remained silent, waiting for his reaction. He could feel the weight of their expectations, but he didn't feel pressured. Instead, he felt something gentle, something warm, a quiet acceptance. He squeezed the child's hand softly and took a slow breath. The Queen stepped back and addressed the court. She told them that the child's emotional response was not a mistake. It was a sign that their efforts had succeeded, a sign that their connection with Earth could be built not on technology, but on understanding. The court members relaxed slightly. Some bowed their heads. Others placed their hands on their hearts, showing respect. He didn't fully understand the cultural meaning, but he felt the shift in the room. What began as shock turned into acceptance. The Queen turned to him once more and said softly, "You were not chosen by chance." He looked down at the child again. The small hand tightened around his, as if afraid he might disappear. In that moment, he realized something important. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He had become a part of a story much bigger than himself. And the child, this quiet, curious child from another world, had found something in him that no one else could give. And that single word the child spoke, "Father," was only the beginning of what that connection truly meant. The next morning felt different from all the others. The air inside the palace was warmer, calmer, almost lighter, as if the walls themselves were finally breathing after years of tension. The humans stood near the balcony again, staring at the sunrise stretching across the alien capital. The sky shifted through soft colors he had never seen on Earth, moving from lavender to pale blue-green. He wasn't alone this time. The small child stood beside him, still holding one of his fingers like it was the most natural thing in the world. The child was quiet but peaceful, watching the sky with wide, bright eyes. There was no fear, no confusion, just trust. He kept thinking about everything that had happened in the last few days. One moment he was a visitor. The next he was pulled into court politics. And the Queen had spoken those words, calling him the one connected to the child. After that, everything had changed. And now, as the sun rose, he realized something important. He couldn't just walk away. Not anymore. The Queen stepped onto the balcony a moment later. Her presence always had a quiet strength to it. She wasn't wearing her battle armor now. Instead, she was dressed in lighter ceremonial clothing that revealed the softer side of her culture. Without the heavy plates, she looked almost human, still regal, still powerful, but more approachable. "The court is waiting for you," she said softly. He raised an eyebrow. "Waiting for me? For what this time?" "To speak," she replied. "To decide what comes next for the child, for the Alliance, and for you." He suddenly felt the weight of the situation pressing on him. "You want me to address your entire court?" She nodded once. "They won't trust my words alone. They need to hear your truth." He sighed. "I'm not a speaker. I'm not a leader. I'm just someone who ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time." The Queen looked at him with calm confidence. "Or the right place at the right time." The child tugged gently at his sleeve, as if encouraging him. He exhaled deeply. "All right. I'll do it." They walked together through the long hallways of the palace. Every step echoed softly. Guards bowed their heads as they passed. Servants paused in silence. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. When they reached the grand hall, the massive doors opened slowly, revealing the entire court. Hundreds of officials, advisors, scholars, and military leaders. And all of them turned towards him the moment he stepped inside. That the memory of the first time he stood there hit him hard. Back then, their eyes were filled with suspicion, confusion, and fear. Today, they held something different: curiosity, respect, and even a hint of hope. The Queen walked ahead and took her place on the high platform. The child stayed with him, gripping his hand tighter as they approached the center of the hall. When they stopped, the Queen lifted her hand to signal silence. "There is much to discuss," she announced. "But first, Our visitor will speak. All eyes shifted to him. He swallowed. He wasn't used to speaking to more than a few people at a time. And now an entire alien civilization was staring at him. His palms felt slightly sweaty, but he took a slow breath and began. I know many of you still don't understand what happened, he said. Honestly, I don't understand everything either. I came here as a guest. I never expected to become part of whatever this is. A few members of the court whispered among themselves, but he continued, but let me say this. I didn't choose to be connected to this child, and the child didn't choose it either. But it happened. And once it happened, I had a choice: either step away and pretend none of this existed, or step forward and protect someone who clearly needs me. The hall grew quiet. I don't know what this bond means scientifically or politically. I don't know why the child said what they said. But I do know this: when someone trusts you, when someone looks at you with that kind of innocence, you don't turn your back on them. The child leaned slightly against him. I'm not saying I want power. I don't want control over your people or your politics. That's not why I'm here. I only want one thing: peace. For the child, for your queen, and for your world. The silence lingered for a long moment. Then an elder member of the court rose slowly. His voice carried across the hall. Your words are sincere, but sincerity is not enough. What role do you intend to play? What future do you see for yourself among us? He took a deep breath. I will stay, as long as the queen allows it. As long as the child needs me, I won't run away from this responsibility. The queen's expression softened ever so slightly. Another official stood. Do you claim authority over the child? He shook his head firmly. Authority? No. Care? Yes. Guidance? Yes, but authority belongs to your queen and your people. That answer made a wave of murmurs move through the crowd. His humility had caught them off guard. Finally, the queen lifted her hand again, signaling silence. Let it be recorded, she said, her voice strong. He stays not as ruler, not as commander, but as guardian. Chosen not by us, but by the child. A low sound of approval spread across the hall. A few members nodded. Others bowed their heads. For the first time since his arrival, he felt truly accepted. After the assembly ended, the queen approached him and the child with a rare smile. You spoke well, she said. I just told the truth, he replied. Truth is powerful, she said. They walked together through the palace gardens, a quiet, peaceful place with glowing plants and soft pathways. The child ran ahead, laughing softly as they played with floating seeds that drifted like little lights. He watched the child with a warm feeling growing in his chest. You know, he said to the queen, I still don't fully understand why the child chose me. The queen looked up at the glowing trees. Children sense things adults ignore. They see trust, connection, and heart. He chuckled. You make it sound simple. It is, she said. Complicated things only grow from simple truths. They sat on a stone bench while the child continued playing. What happens now? He asked her. She considered the question. Now you learn our ways. You become part of our world, and we make space for you in our future. He smiled softly. That sounds like a big responsibility. You are not alone, she assured him. My advisors, my people, and I, we stand with you. He glanced at the child. And them too, I guess. The queen's eyes softened with quiet emotion. Especially them. For a while, they sat in peaceful silence. The child eventually ran back to him, climbing onto the bench and curling against his side. Tired from playing, he wrapped an arm around the small figure. Feeling the warmth and trust in that small gesture, the queen watched them quietly. Do you ever miss your old world? She asked. Dottie thought about it. The busy streets, the noise, the familiar smells. It all felt so far away now. I do. But not the way I expected. And this world? She asked. He looked around, the glowing plants, the calm sky, the strange beauty of everything. It feels new, but it doesn't feel wrong. The Queen smiled faintly. Then maybe this is where your story continues. He felt something shift inside him at those words. A sense of belonging. A sense of purpose. As evening fell, the palace prepared a small ceremony, not a grand event like before, but a simple gathering, welcoming him officially. No heavy speeches, just warm gestures, respectful greetings, and sincere kindness. At one point, a young ambassador approached him and said, "You may not realize it, but today changed our history." He didn't know how to respond. He wasn't trying to change anything. He was just trying to do the right thing. Later, after the ceremony ended, he walked back to his quarters with the Queen and the child. The hallways were quiet now, lit with soft lights that made everything look peaceful. Before they parted, the Queen turned to him. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" He asked. "For caring," she replied. "Not out of duty, but out of heart." He looked at the child sleeping peacefully in his arms. Anyone with a heart would care. "Not everyone," she said quietly. "But you do." He nodded slowly. "I'll protect them. I promise." The Queen placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "And we will protect you." As he walked into his room, he felt the weight of everything, but not in a heavy way. More like a sense of direction. He looked down at the sleeping child. Their small hands curled lightly against his chest. A tiny breath. A soft sound. "Absolute trust." He whispered. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Outside, the alien world glowed peacefully. Inside, for the first time since he arrived, he felt like he truly belonged. This wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of a new life, one he never expected, but one he was ready to face. With courage, with heart. And with a child who had changed everything by saying one simple word, "Father."